Hello, sports fans, and welcome to the PRman and the Coach Talking Ball podcast, courtesy of Sportskeeda. Before we recap the highlights and the lowlights of the NFL Week 1 and look ahead to several key matchups in the NFL Week 2, beginning with tonight's key matchup at Arrowhead Stadium between the visiting Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs, I want to hit you guys up with a disclaimer. There are tons of sports broadcasts out there in cyberspace that are hosted by guys who profess they have inside information and understand the inner workings of the NFL. But what you guys are about to listen to and about to be immersed in is 45 minutes of sports podcast discussion that will be hosted and conducted by real league insiders who will take you inside the locker room, inside the critical thinking of a former NFL head coach, and provide you, the fan, with expert analysis about what's really going on within the well-guarded and hallowed halls of the 32 NFL team practice facilities. I'm Reggie Roberts, longtime NFL public relations communications executive who spent more than 30 years working at NFL headquarters in New York City and as PR lead team spokesman for both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Joining me today on PRman and the Coach Talking Ball podcast presented by Sportskeeda is a retired NFL head coach who really needs no introduction. He guided the Falcons to the playoffs 4 times during his 5 seasons as head coach, and earned Sporting News NFL Coach of the Year honors 3 times, both in 2008, 2010, and 2012. My co-host and my friend for today's podcast is the winningest head coach in Atlanta Falcons history. Please say hello to Coach Mike Smith. Hey, Mike, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Reggie. How about you?
Hey, man, I'm good. I'm just trying to get my technical difficulties solved, and finally we got that going. We can talk a little bit of ball.
Yeah, man. Hey, first week in the books, overreaction Monday. What more can you ask about, right?
Hey, there's a lot of it. We're gonna tee it up and get right to it because talk about overreaction Monday or overreaction Tuesday, whatever day it is. There's a lot of overreaction going on in Dallas. A lot of trouble in Dallas. If you listen to my good friends who do the radio and the TV in Dallas, they've already said. I don't know if you saw First Take on Monday, but is the season really over in Big Dallas? Like ESPN's top analyst and proud Dallas Cowboys hater Stephen A. Smith said on Monday following the news of Dak Prescott's injury. Talk radio, as you can well imagine, Mike, is on fire in Dallas, according to my friends who cover the Cowboys and Dallas sports in the Dallas Metroplex. Coach Mike McCarthy and owner Jerry Jones, both kind of optimistic that Dak's going to be back in less than the 6 to 8 week time frame. But you know what? With this kind of injury, you don't know, and neither of those guys are doctors, so they don't really know. So the question for you, Coach, losing your starting quarterback's always tough. As a former head coach who dealt with your share of injuries to key players, how would you manage this situation this early in the season?
Well, Reggie, this is a very difficult situation when you lose your starting quarterback in week 1, and you don't really know when he's coming back. It leaves a lot of unknowns for the head coach, the general manager, the owner, the fans. There's so many unknowns, but there's a lot of factors that go into the decision-making process. And I think the first thing you got to find out is how long is the player going to be out? And if it's 4 to 6, it's a different animal than if it's 8 to 10. And I think right now everybody's saying there's a potential that he might be back in 6 weeks. The other thing you got to be concerned about is what are the cap consequences on the decision that you're going to make. I mean, you can't just go out and say, oh, we're going to go get the best guy. And, there's some guys that are available that are not on a roster right now. Guys like Cam Newton, Mike Glennon, Josh Johnson, those guys, they're available. They're street free agents, but are they going to really be able to come in and be a bridge for 4 weeks or 6 weeks and be better than Cooper Rush, who's been with the Cowboys all preseason, been with the team for a couple of years. I think he even's got a win as a starter against the Vikings, I think, in 2019. And then you got Will Greer, who's on the practice squad, that would be a guy you'd be able to slide right up. But, hey, it's Big D. Everybody wants to talk about it, and they've got all kinds of answers. I heard somebody talking about the potential of they're going to go out and maybe go get Roethlisberger. I mean, come on, man, right? I mean, Ben's not coming cheap, and I'm sure they're up against the cap. I don't know their cap situation, but there's so many factors involved. And I think they need to be prudent in going out and check all the options that are available. But I think you got to go with the guy that's been with you, been in camp, and try to get you and be a bridge for the 4 to 6 weeks. Now, if it's 8 to 10 or 8 to 12, and he's going on injured reserve IR, maybe it's a whole different deal. But those conversations are being thrown about in the media, and I guess it's great. Hey, it's great to fill the ink, and go ahead and spill it out there. But everybody's got ideas, but the Cowboys are going to go out there and do what they think is best for them.
Like, how much pressure goes into that decision? I mean, you're the head coach. We used to talk about all the time in Atlanta. You're the thermostat in the building. If everybody sees you, you're smiling. Even if we're not playing good, if you sort of set the temperature in the building. What's that like when you have a key injury that big, that early in the season? I mean, the coaches are the coaches involved? You talk about maybe we can run the ball and play defense. I mean, what kind of conversations are going on in that building right now?
Oh gosh, you gotta put the noise off to the side. You've got to really dive into what are we going to do? How are we going to approach it? First thing you got to do is make the personnel decision, what we just discussed. Then the second thing is that you've got to decide, okay, what are we going to do with who we have at quarterback now? Dak Prescott has unique talents and unique strengths, and you're not going to find a guy like him. So if you bring in and you go with Cooper Rush, the game plan's going to have to change. You're going to, how are we going to try to manage the situation at the quarterback position, which is a tough one because this is a quarterback-driven league. Are we going to have to run the ball more? Are we going to rely on the short passing game? Are we going to try to formation people and get simpler reads for the quarterback? Those are all things that go on, and then you got to even go on the other side of the ball and say, all right, do we need to change what we're doing defensively? Right. To make the game go and the flow of the game go a little bit different. Right.
Well, I'm sure those conversations are going on in Dallas. And I've read something this morning, talked about McCarthy saying one thing, Jerry saying something else. So I'm just hoping, I'm hoping for the fans and hoping for their sake they sort of hurry and get that sorted out, because if they would, everybody will be watching.
Oh yeah, they claim to be America's team, and when something happens, everybody in America wants to talk about it. Not only America, but all over the world.
All over the world. You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
Absolutely. So, hey, this is going to be going on for quite some time. Until he gets back, and then there's going to be the watch that goes on about what did he do today? Today we saw him on the sideline because right now they're putting him on injured reserve. It'll be breaking news, when he gets back on the sideline. But let's hope he gets back. He's one of the better players in the NFL, and you hate to see an injury in week 1. Right.
Well, let's switch to the madness. Let's go a little bit further south. Let's switch to the madness down in Central Florida. It's been unbelievable. Just to recap for those who aren't paying attention. You're on the podcast. We're talking ball with the coach, with the PRman, the coach, courtesy of Sportskeeda. Unless you've been living under a rock and haven't been paying attention to the NFL, you're aware of what happened in training camp. Tom asked the team 4.5 since during training camp. He's gone for 11 days to tend to some family matters. And then, but what's been shocking is the speculation. I don't know if you saw this, Smitty, but there's his wife Gisele Bundchen, who obviously is one of the top models in the world, is on the cover of Elle magazine this week, and she's talking about there's stuff about. There's stuff in there talking about, she wants him to be home more, wants to be more present with the kids. I read something the other day that, it's basically the theater of the absurd. Problems with the wife. He was taping a reality show, not wanting to practice, blah, 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 whatever. But the one thing that I did notice that on the night of the Saturday night of the final preseason game that he played in, he looked like Tom Brady. And then on Sunday night when they were playing in Dallas against the Cowboys, they won against a decimated Cowboys team, especially on the offensive side with the tackling and with Dak. But he looked like Tom Brady. So all I know is this: the guy could have missed. He missed 11 days. He could have missed 22 days, and and he would have been great. So, the bottom line is the guy's got 7 rings. You're not going to confuse him. You're not going to show him anything he hasn't seen. So just to put the question to the coach, winningest coach in Falcons franchise history, what's your take on all this Tom Brady nonsense?
Well, I think it's a lot to do about nothing. I really do. Tom, hey, it gets people talking if that's what their goal is, and gets people clicking and going to different websites and such. But Tom Brady is without a doubt the greatest quarterback and probably the greatest leader as a football player in the history of the National Football League. I mean, he still holds up one hand and it's all got all that gold, right? Yeah. So all that bling, absolutely. And he's not the first guy that's missed time in training camp. There's been a lot of veterans, I'm sure, and I can speak personally. When Tony Gonzalez came to me and Thomas Dimitroff and Arthur Blank about he needed some time away and he wanted to step away during training camp to spend time to watch his son, Nico, go through his freshman year, I believe it was, or maybe it was his 7th grade year. I can't recall what year it was, but, wanted to be a part of him in his football, his football career. And when it was starting out, and Tony didn't need to practice. Tony, and just like Tom doesn't need to practice. There's certain guys on teams that don't have to go out and practice. We used to hold Julio Jones out at least once, and sometimes 2 times a week. We did.
Roddy White. Roddy didn't practice.
Roddy didn't practice. Yeah, The guys that got it and get it and don't need the work, that they can be there. So I think this is a way for people to talk about Tom and Brady, and I don't think there's anything really to it. I just think that Tom is going to always be prepared and ready to go. It was obvious on the game Sunday night that he was ready, and he did what he always does. He moves the team, and he does what he has to do to win a football game. And that's what the great quarterbacks do. Sometimes they got to throw it all over the field. Sometimes they got to hand it off. Tom knows the feel of the game and what it takes. And I was really impressed with what he did with that Tampa Bay offense. And maybe they want him to go away for 22 days. If he went away for 22 days, they might even been more impressive.
He was unbelievable. He was sharp. He hit the right guy. He didn't have normally the amount of time that he normally has, but he was efficient, and they kicked a bunch of field goals and built the lead, and he looked like he always looked. He looked like he always looked.
Yeah, Tom's going to always do what it takes to win, because he's all about that. He's all about getting the win, and it doesn't matter how pretty it is. It doesn't matter what the stats are. He's a team player, and he's the leader of that team, and you could tell that offense looked a little bit different than it did last year. I think he's got a lot more input right now than he has in years past.
You're on the podcast, PRman, the Coach Talking Ball podcast, presented by Sportskeeda. Coach, there's a lot of new faces in the NFL on week 1. 2022 season began with 10 new head coaches taking over NFL teams. 4 of those coaches, won their first game on Sunday. Just to kind of go over real quick. Head coach Matt Eberflus for the Bears. They beat the Niners. Brian Daboll, the Giants. They beat the Jets in a game that had a heart-pounding finish. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Down in South Florida, Mike McDaniel got the Dolphins to a season-opening win over the Patriots. And Kevin O'Connell, who's a new former offensive coordinator, offensive whiz kid, so to speak, for the defending Super Bowl champion Rams, got things rolling with the Vikings with a 23-7 win over the Green Bay Packers. Winning on an opening day is hard, as you and I have talked about. Winning period in the NFL is hard. But the one thing that kind of struck me about that, and I looked this up, all 4 of those guys who won, that beat opponents who made the playoffs last season. That's kind of a neat story. But let's just pose this question. You participated in 7 opening day games. You remember what your record was?
Yeah, Reg. I think it could have been better, but it was 4-3, and I think there were like two overtime games.
There were 2 overtime.
Yeah, 2 overtime games. I think in 2009 against Miami, we went to overtime.
Yep.
Ended up winning. Or I'm sorry, it was Pittsburgh. Not yeah, Pittsburgh. We lost. Yeah,
yep.
We lost, and then we won in 2014 against New Orleans. Yeah, 37-34. But everybody wants to start off with a win, Reg, because you only get one opportunity for a first impression. Right. And your first impression is probably the most important thing. So, that's to me is the most important thing about week one is it's your first impression and you're kind of setting the tone. And these new coaches, I'm sure that it's the day the schedule came out, they started, working with their staff and making sure that they were going to be prepared for week one. And they did a great job. There were some big games and some big tough decisions that have to be made in the in the NFL. You mentioned the Giants game. Going for two, right? Well, I think that going for two to win the ball game has been made a little bit easier in terms of that decision since they've moved the extra point line back. Because the extra point's not a given when you kick it, from the 15-yard line.
No, it's not.
When you place the ball there. So it's not a given. And I think it was a great shot in the arm for the New York Giants because they had some things that went on, I think, in the preseason with some of the media there in New York, and I think they got into some scuffles and things like that. There was some stuff. And they were, they're practicing against one another, other teams. So they got off to a great start, and hats off to Coach Dayball for making that decision. And I think the buzzword about analytics and all that, it probably leans towards the analytical people will tell you that you should go for two a lot more than you think. And hey, let's just win it now, and that's what they did. They had a great situation. That
game was a really good game. The other game that was the late afternoon game was the Packers-Vikings game, and there was all this talk about what the Vikings offense would look like, with a new group, new coach, new coaching staff, and there was an article in the offseason about Justin Jefferson, who's a third-year receiver from LSU. And I kind of followed him since I'm a Louisiana native. I follow that guy since he played at LSU.
Yeah, you're a homer. I'm
a homer. I am. I'm a homer.
Yeah, no. Hey, and you can admit it openly to everybody.
Openly. Go Tigers.
Openly.
Go Tigers.
Yep, that's right.
It was so fun to watch him because he lined up all over the field. They lined him up in the slot. They lined him up at flanker. They lined him out wide. And the guy had I think he had 9 catches, 184 yards, 2 TDs. He averaged 20.4 yards every time he touched the ball. I mean, he was just unbelievable. So, question as a coach, as a defensive-minded coach who made your bones on defense, you went up against some of the top guys in football, not only when you were, in Jacksonville as a defensive coordinator when you made your bones, but as a head coach. I mean, you obviously had input on our defense in Atlanta. Can you talk about some guys who made you burn that late midnight oil getting ready for? That was like.
Reggie, and this is becoming a passing league. There's no doubt about it. It's quarterback driven and wide receiver driven on the offensive side of the ball. And with that, you have to have a good left tackle if you got a right-handed quarterback. But let me tell you, man, there were some sleepless nights. We had to defend guys like Andre Johnson, Larry Fitzpatrick, Calvin Johnson, Reggie Wayne, Wes Welker, Demaryius Thomas, Brandon Marshall. I mean, I can go on and on and on, And hey, the coaches that are scheming now have got guys that are at the same level. Maybe not at some of those guys like Larry, who's going to be a shoe-in first ballot, Hall of Famer. But the thing that's changed a little bit, Reggie, in terms of defending these guys is they're moving them around, just like you said that the Vikings did this week. Before you knew, hey, Wes Welker was going to be in the slot,
right?
And Andre Johnson was going to be the X receiver,
right?
Didn't matter whether it was 12 personnel, 11 personnel. You knew where they were going to be. Now they're moving them around. I mean, it's like find Waldo. That's what you got to do. You got to find out where he's going to align, right. And then you've got to give extra resources to the for the great players. You know, you've got to either roll the coverage that way to the side that he's on, or you have to double him, lean the safety there, or you have somebody, and a lot of people are doing it now, where they are mirroring, they're just putting one guy on him, one cornerback, and going and matching him all over the field. So there's a lot of strategy that's going on, but you're starting to see these wide receivers play all three positions. You know, they're not always lining up in the slot. They're not always lining up as the Z receiver, which is to the tight end side, or or the X receiver. And hey, let me tell you, you got to have a plan for that, and you got to be prepared for them not being in the same spot. They're going to be moving around. They're going to be trying to hide them. You know, and there's some teams that have corners that can go and play left and right side and can slide in there and be, your nickel corner when they line up in the slot. So it's going to continue to be that way. I think more teams are going to start moving these guys around and making you find them. And then you're going to have to figure out how you're going to double them. Are you going to, roll to them and put somebody over the top? Are you going to banjo them and play inside outside? And it's going to be a chess match, and that's where the game's, it's going. It's going away from the run. You still got to be able to run the football, but it's all about defending those top-notch, elite wide receivers. And you can't say a Z receiver, X receiver, because they're going to line up all over the field.
It doesn't exist anymore, Mike. And you can't. And then as a defensive coordinator, I'm just guessing. As a defensive coordinator, as a defensive coach, you can't do the same thing. You got to switch it up. You got to switch it up and make the in-game adjustments, based on what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. You have to, it's a chess match, and you've got, they're going to show their cards in terms of what they're going to do offensively, and you've got to go out there and match. And you're going to do it one way in the first quarter or one way in the first series, and then switch it up, and to me, that's the thing that's the most interesting, is watching these receiver defensive back matchups. And again, when you start talking about these matchups, they're the ones that are making the most money. You go, but obviously the quarterback, he touches the ball every snap, and then you've got the guys that run the routes. And this is a passing league. I mean, this is a passing league. So you got to have guys that defend them and put pressure on the quarterback. But it's a chess match, and it's fun to watch, and it's fun to hear the commentators talk about the ways that they are trying to slow down these elite receivers, because you're not gonna stop them all the time. You just got to slow them down.
Now, the Packers didn't have a good day because they lined this guy. They lined Justin up all over the place. I mean, he was complaining during the offseason that he didn't line up. He didn't get to line up much in the slot his first few years. But I mean, they had him in the slot. They had him out wide. They had him at the X. They had him at the Z. I mean, it was fun to watch, because a lot of times the Packers had the personnel guys coming in late, and guys it looked like a fire drill. Guys trying to figure out where they were going. And once that happened, they got you. They got you. The guys get running free doing this thing. He had a big game. You have great respect and admiration for. Mike didn't talk very much. In the Pittsburgh media, it can be a little tough. Those guys are kind of have been kind of tough since he's been there. I don't know. He's never had a losing season. 15 straight seasons without a losing season, and he still gets a lot of criticism. And he didn't really reveal who the quarterback was going to be until he lined up under center. So, Trubisky played good. He didn't play great, but he sort of managed the game. The one thing that I did notice that he's 30-21. I didn't know he'd won that many games. He's had 50 starts. He's 30-21 as an NFL starting quarterback, and he's the first quarterback since the AFL 1970 merger with 50 career starts who hadn't thrown a pick six. I didn't realize that until I read that. That's a pretty impressive stat. So let me ask you this question, Coach. What was your approach when you're on a team that you didn't have a Matt Ryan, or Matt Ryan was hurt, you had to start somebody that didn't quite have the skill set that Matt had? What was your approach and your offensive approach for a guy who might not have had the talent that Matt had, and you have to start him at quarterback?
Yeah, well, Reggie, I can speak to that in a couple of different ways. One is, when we drafted Matt, we wanted to make sure we knew he was going to be a great player. We knew he was going to be a great thrower of the football. We knew he had the mind to do that. But when he was a rookie, we felt like he was going to be our starter. We wanted to put people around him like Michael Turner, so we were going to run the football and make sure that we had a solid running game, and let him, instead of having to make all the plays throwing the football down the field, let him get his feet wet and manage the game, because there's so many things that a quarterback has to manage in an NFL football game. It's the clock, it's the substitution, it's the people coming in and out of the huddle. So we wanted him to manage the game, and we wanted to shrink it down. Now, for the game that you're talking about, when you throw 5 interceptions like the Cincinnati Bengals did, it doesn't matter what the other quarterback probably does. Your chances of winning a game in the NFL being -5 or -4 in the turnover margin, you got no chance. I mean, no chance in hell of, probably in 2%. In fact, everybody talked about, if you're -3 and -4, hell, I don't even know if they have a stat for -5. I'm sure they do, but I mean, you got slim to none. But what Coach Tomlin made the decision to start Trubisky. Well, he's, and don't take this the wrong way. I don't want anybody to take it the wrong way. He managed the game. They got out yardaged by, 250, 300 yards, but he didn't turn the ball over. He didn't turn the ball over. They played to Pittsburgh's strength, and what Pittsburgh's strength has been for a long time is all Mike Tomlin teams are going to be stout on defense. Even though they gave up a bunch of yards, they took the ball away 5 times. And it was a hard fought game, and really it was a lot closer than I would have thought, being having 5 turnovers. But Mike is going to do whatever it takes in each individual game to make decisions to win. And he decided to go with Trubisky, and again, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. He is a quarterback that can manage the game. He's not going to throw pick sixes. He may throw some bad throws and all that, and his statistics aren't going to be off the charts, but he did manage the game. And all you want to do in the NFL in this day and time, with 5 minutes to go, you want to be within 7 points, and because the majority of the games end up that way. You got to manage them differently based on so many factors. Who's healthy, who's not healthy on your team, who's healthy, who's not healthy on the other team. What's the weather, what's the weather like? I mean, there's just so many factors that, that go into it. Oh, is my kicker healthy?
Is he hot?
Yeah, is he hot? Yeah.
Has he been bad? What was his warm up? What was his warm up like in pregame? Exactly.
All of those things are part of the formula in performing as a head football coach in the National Football League. And obviously Mike Tomlin gets it, and he gets it the way you're supposed to do it, because he makes very, very good decisions for the Pittsburgh Steelers for so many years, and he gets it. And Mike helps, he helps the Pittsburgh Steelers win more games than he helps them lose. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. The one thing that I noticed on the Thursday night game, with the Buffalo Bills, who probably for all intents and purposes had a chance to possibly go deeper in the playoffs than they went last year. What for a couple of injuries and some questionable calls down late in the game. But those guys flew cross country, which is always hard. No sooner than the Rams had raised their championship banner, those guys went to work and beat the defending Super Bowl champions by 3 scores. And yet, with all as well as they play, they got the quarterback that's really good. They got a couple of receivers that are really good, and Devon Miller, who won a Super Bowl playing with the Rams last year, has now switched sides. He's now on Buffalo's side, trying to help them get to the game. Why isn't anybody talking more about the Bills and talking about how good they are. I mean, I keep, all the talks about Tom Brady, all the talks about the Bucks and what's going on in Dallas. Why isn't anybody talking about how good the Bills are?
Well, I think people that understand and know football, they're talking about them. They were impressive.
They were.
Capital I, impressive.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, man, that guy is a rising star in the National Football League. He is calm, cool, and collected. You can see he plays with confidence. He can shake off bad plays, and that's what quarterbacks have to do. I was super impressed with him. And, Sean McDermott, he's been building this team. This isn't, they haven't gone out and done a whole lot of splash signings. They signed Von Miller, who's a great, addition to their defense. And maybe it's the missing piece, but most of the guys on that team are guys that have come through and gotten there through the draft. It's impressive what they've done, and they have been very methodical, and he's done a great job, and he comes out of the Tom Coughlin tree. So he's going to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and he's done an outstanding job. And he's put together a great staff. Defensively, they are sound as any team in the National Football League in terms of what they're doing. And Leslie Frazier's done a great job. Sean's background is in defense, but Leslie's done a great job. You're not going to find them having these big explosive plays, these big gashing, plays. They play very complementary football to one another. The D-line complements the secondary complements the linebackers, and that's what you have to have on the defensive side. And the way that Josh Allen can stand in that pocket and throw the football is impressive. But what's more impressive is what he has the potential to do with his legs. I mean, he's a big, strong quarterback. And, if you were going to say what would you want in this day and age in the National Football League, it'd be Josh Allen. Yeah. I mean, he's something. So I'm really excited to watch the Bills. The Bills Mafia, they're talking about them.
Yeah, they are.
The real football people, they're talking about them. But, sometimes a team gets overlooked early on. But I promise you, they'll be talking about them in 4 weeks from now.
Yeah, they will. Well, listen, we're gonna let you go. Have you hit the golf ball today? Or you put your line in the water today, or is that later? Or is that tomorrow?
That's tomorrow.
Okay.
That's tomorrow. We're gonna put the peg in about 9:30 on the first tee, and hopefully when the game is over, I'm putting my hand out.
Yeah, collect it.
Hey, I'm not going into my pocket.
Yeah. President.
That's right. But Reggie, it was a pleasure catching up. I can't wait to the next time we do it.
We're gonna you and I'll talk offline and figure out what your schedule is, and we'll tee it up again with podcast Talking Ball with the coach, courtesy of Sportskeeda. So thank you so much for checking us out. We'll be back to you probably sometime after conclusion of week 2's games. We'll check with the coach's schedule, and we'll re-up and we'll come back to you. We'll re-up and come back and do this again sometime next week. Have a great week, Coach. Good luck tomorrow in your game.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
All right, man. Talk soon. Thank you. Take care.